Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hartley. This podcast exists to equip and inspire your heart-centered leadership. Every week, we bring interviews with some of the greatest heart sets and mindsets on the planet. I hope the heartprint of our time spent together is that it creates new possibilities for you and all those you come into contact with. If you'd like to explore what we could make possible for you, then head to abty.co.uk/connect and book in a free 30-minute call to begin our journey together. I just want to express a huge amount of gratitude to our sponsors, Matt Media Online, an independent agency who specialise in content marketing, helping businesses get their message seen by the right audience. Matt has produced all the digital media assets for this podcast since episode 106 back in December 2020. To have Matt in your corner, head to mattmedia.online. I'd also like to thank Exhale Coffee. I have been a big fan of Exhale Coffee since meeting Alex and the team back in 2022. Exhale is the first coffee to be sourced, roasted and lab tested specifically to maximize its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potency. An independent lab test has shown that 1 cup of Exhale coffee has the same antioxidant power as 1.8 kilos of blueberries or 55 oranges. I'm a huge fan, and Mrs. H loves the decaf, especially because she knows that Exhale use the mountain water decaffeination process, which uses only pure glacial water from the highest mountain in Mexico and no nasty chemicals. Simply head to exhalecoffee.com/ABTY for your special offer. And lastly, before I introduce this week's guest, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would really help us leave a greater heartprint on this world. On episode 240 is an honour and privilege to welcome Dr. Michael Gervais to the podcast. Michael is a high-performance psychologist, author, and one of the world's leading experts on the relationship between the mind and human performance. Over the course of a 20-year career working with world-class performers at an organisation, Dr. Gervais has developed a framework for the mental skills and practices that allow organisations, teams and individuals to thrive in pressure-packed environments. Dr. Michael's clients include NFL Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks, world record holders, Olympians, MVPs from every major sport, and internationally acclaimed music artists and Fortune 50 CEOs. He is the host of the Finding Mastery podcast that explores the psychology of the world's most extraordinary thinkers and doers, and he is the author of upcoming book, The First Rule of Mastery, that is due to come out in November. It's an incredible conversation, one that I hope continues to inspire you down the path of mastery, and I know that this conversation will leave you better than yesterday. It's episode 240 with Dr. Michael Gervais. Michael, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you, brother?
First of all, I love the name of your podcast. And so I'm great. I'm grateful to be here as well.
Michael, I've been a huge fan of your work since December 2017. I first listened to your podcast when you had Stuart Lancaster on. So been a huge admirer of your work. And I just want to first and foremost start this with a huge, deep gratitude for sharing that gift with the world.
Yeah, very cool. It's fun that you know the exact month that you started listening.
Yeah.
And Stuart's a legend. And so, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that episode. It was really great. I particularly enjoyed the bit where he talked about how the new players coming to their training camp, he would have letters given to them by everybody that had kind of interacted with them along that player's career journey, all the way from grassroots, that real sense of you're doing it, you're representing many people who had touched your career and your life at that point. I thought that was a really powerful takeaway from that episode.
That's cool. Yeah.
You have an incredible book coming out soon, and I'm sure we're going to dive into that. But I just want to first and foremost put the word mastery front and center. Like mastery and master, are they two different things? What's the difference?
Mastery is the process, and it literally is the process of unlocking the dormant potential, unlocking the skills and abilities and the insights and wisdom that are maybe right at the surface, or if depending on where you are in the journey, like, deep and dormant. So mastery is the process or the path. And there's two types that we're interested in: mastery of self and mastery of craft.
Mm.
And I am far more interested in mastery of self.
Hmm.
Mastery of craft to me feels like an excuse to better understand mastery of self.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
in our modern society, we obsess around performance. We obsess
Right.
about how well we do at just about anything. And when we double click or pause there is the opportunity in whatever the activity is that we're doing to better understand our psychology. So it's like
Mm.
mastery of self through mastery of craft. And that's where, as a psychologist, of course I'm going to leverage on that side, but I'm fascinated by what high pressured, high stress, rugged, sometimes consequential environments have to teach us about our psychology, about our relationships with ourselves and relationships with
Mm.
other people.
Hey friends, before we dive back into the interview, I just wanted to take a quick moment and ask for your help. Did you know that only 7% of you, 7% are currently subscribed to the YouTube channel? If you are enjoying the content so far and haven't hit the subscribe button yet, now is the perfect time to do it. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest videos and you'll become part of our fantastic community. Plus, it's entirely free and it takes just a second. Just click that red subscribe button below this video. Not only will you never miss out on our future content, but you'll also be showing your support for this channel and helping us grow. It's your way of saying, hey, I love what you're doing and I want to see more. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload a new video. So if you're one of the 93% who hasn't subscribed yet, join the 7% who already have. And let's make this community even more awesome together. Thank you for being here. Let's get back to that interview. Yeah, I mean, you've spent over a decade at the very forefront of elite sport, some of the world's greatest, and I guess what was your own process of just getting in that room? Like, what was your own process of personal mastery?
Oh, I think I'm on the path. I don't think that I'm going to put my masthead anywhere here. Um, so if I answer it like my path, it started, I think, with most people that I've come to respect that are also on the path, was some sort of pain. And my origin story, looking back, I didn't know it at the time, was that I was a young athlete.
Yeah.
Surfing was my sport, and
Mhm.
there was two real pressure points for me in
Yeah.
surfing. One was waves of consequence, and so when you make a mistake, there's just like it sounds, there's real consequence. There's physical consequence that can take place. But that wasn't the spur that changed my trajectory. It was, as a 15-year-old kid, the conditions were ideal. There was only 3 people out in the ocean. It was a competition day, glassy conditions, a foot or two overhead. And it's exactly what we all hope for. Like, you're not
Mhm.
having to fight and scrap for waves. It's like you get your pick almost. And however, I was a disaster. And the reason I was a disaster in this very particular competition, like most of my competitions at that time, is that I was caring too much about what other people were thinking. I was caring too
Mm.
much about all the things that could go wrong. And a senior, I was a 15-year-old kid and I was surfing against 20 some, 30 sums, and he paddles by me and he just looks at me like this kind of wise man, but he's a 27-year-old surfer. Maybe he inhabited something, really rich. And he just looks and he says, Gervais, you got to stop worrying about all the things that could go wrong. I've surfed with you every day. Like,
Mm.
get your shit together. And
Mm.
so, as a 15-year-old kid, my eyes just like opened wide. And I thought,
Yeah.
how does he know? How does he know that all I'm thinking about are all the mistakes and all the
Yeah.
consequences of those mistakes? And the big one was, what are my friends going to think,
Sure.
if I'm out here, quote unquote, as a kook? And like a good competitor, he didn't tell me what to do. And as he paddled off, I thought, well, let me just flip it. And I started thinking about things that could go well.
Yeah.
And it just dropped me into this place where I felt more connected to myself. I felt more connected to my surfboard. And I thought, what was that? What was this thinking thing
Mm.
that just changed everything? And so that led me to be really curious. I think maybe obsessively so, which I say with pain in that. You know,
Yeah.
I've there's been a high cost to me working to understand
Mm.
psychology, and it's the cost of relationships. And but it led me down the path to understand how the human psychology works and how the psychology of excellence works. And that's what's led us to this conversation eventually.
Friends, thank you for being here so far. I just want to have a heart-to-heart moment with the men. Men, are you tired of going it alone? Do you want to connect with other men who have been there, who have gone before you? Then Akira is the group for you. We know that as men we're supposed to have it all figured out, but the truth is none of us have all the answers. Well, that's where Akira comes in. Our group of successful men is here to provide you with the support, guidance, and advice that you need to achieve your goals. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. Our members have been through the ups and downs of life, and we've come out the other side wiser and stronger. We want to share our knowledge and experience with you so that you can avoid the pitfalls and reach your potential. Akira is our brotherhood, a place where men can be vulnerable, share their struggles, and celebrate their victories. We meet regularly to discuss the issues that matter most to us, from career, finances, relationships, and personal growth, and we do it all in a safe and confidential environment. So if you're ready to level up in life and become the best version of you, the best version of you for yourself and those you lead, then consider joining Akira today. You can find out all the information that you need at abty.co.uk/Akira. The link's in the show notes. We're waiting for you, brother. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I'm a big Formula One fan, and I remember listening to your Toto Wolff episode, which was even further back than the Stuart Lancaster one. I went back into the archives because I had particular interest, and there's this one bit where Toto talks about like the final 1% is having some form of trauma or humiliation. And I guess like there's this question, like, does it have to be that way? Like, to be the world's, to be one of the greatest, or to even achieve our own personal mastery, does there have to be the presence of some form of trauma and humiliation?
Yeah, there does. And that's my understanding. I don't know anyone that's passed through those gates or understands the language of mastery without having, it doesn't mean that the committed path has to have trauma or, suffering or pain. However, it is required to be on the path to understand suffering, to know it within yourself so you can see it in others. And I'll say that because nobody does the extraordinary alone. We need each other. We are more connected than we'd like to acknowledge. We are social beings masquerading like individual performers, and it's a complete farce. And so that straw man, that deck of cards is so flimsy that when it gets chin checked or when it gets poked at, and people do these weird things to defend that position, and it's unbecoming, it's overwhelming, it's anxiety provoking. And so we need each other. Nobody does it alone, meaning that even individual performers, like a tennis player or fill in the blank, whoever, has a support team behind them. But it's deeper than that. It's far deeper than that. We are all interconnected, and not until you understand your own suffering and your own pain and your own trigger points, and you've studied yourself. If you so psychology is the study of self, and it's got a bad rap for good reasons. Like, as a field, we have not been the custodians of cool. We have not been the custodians of like how amazing this science is. And we can get into that later. But the idea that the study of yourself is a grounding idea to say, what makes you work? And if you don't examine or don't allow yourself to get down into the pain points, you just stay up at the surface. And mastery has nothing to do with surface shine. It has nothing to do with like the metallic experience of celebration of, excellence. It's far deeper. And if you sit with anybody that has, in an honest way, committed their life efforts to fundamentally understanding mastery of self and craft, they'll start with like, oh, I don't know if this is for everybody. They'll start with something like that. And there's no chest thumping. It's not what it is. There's flesh that's been laid. And it's that I grew up surfing and skateboarding, and that's very
literal
much a
flesh.
skateboarding.
Literal flesh. Yeah.
When you make a mistake skateboarding, like you leave flesh on asphalt. And you know what's amazing about that community is that when you do that, and it looks like you're an individual contributor, you're an individual performer. But what happens when you're really going for something and you keep making a mistake and you keep burning and you've got road rash all over you and blood and whatever, the rest of the people around, even if you don't know them, they'll start to turn their board upside down and they'll start clanking their board on something. And it's this very particular sound that skateboarders will know. But what it means is we see you. We see you going for it. We see you like getting on your edge. We see you trying to unlock it and figure it out. We see your flesh. Keep going. And nobody does it alone. And so
I love that. It's a really powerful, I remember watching the Olympics. I think it was last year. There's a young British girl, Sky Brown. She competed in the skateboarding. And I remember watching the finals and exactly what you're saying, the skate community just coming around, just absolutely buzzing for each other. There's just something else in that. And it is, there is something about that, because I think this self-centered thing is a bit wounded warrior to some degree. I remember saying the words myself. I remember because I haven't really always had a father present. So a lot of my then achievements as a result of that, I would say I'm self-made. That's almost like as a wounded response to saying I can't rely on anybody. But if I look at any point in my life, there's always been someone that has nudged me, listened to me, so I've come to surrender the self-made mantra, and really lean into what you say. That's really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I'm nodding my head to it. Nice job. Yep, I see the same thing.
Why do you think then there's a hidden epidemic?
The hidden epidemic of this idea that we are terrified. We are overwhelmed. We are highly anxious about what other people might be thinking of us. And so I think that that's an epidemic that is just below the surface, that is directly contributing to the human energy crisis, this crisis of energy that we are feeling tired and exhausted and irritated and overwhelmed. And like we don't have enough time for ourselves, but then when we get time with ourselves, we do anything other than tune in. We check in, social, we do something else. But we're craving a sense of being aligned with ourselves. So the epidemic is a human energy crisis. And what sits right underneath of that surface is what we're coining FOPO, fear of people's opinion. It's not clinical. It is, it doesn't rise to the surface that anyone needs to be hospitalized or medicated for it. It's not that. It's right below the surface. And it is the water we drink. It's the air we breathe. It's this idea that it's it's like The Sixth Sense, the movie. And, once you recognize that this thing is there, this fear of other people's opinion, you
Mm.
you you recognize that it's just about everywhere. It's everywhere you look. And so, FOPO as a epidemic it shows up like if you check your phone to appear that you're busy or in demand,
Mm.
right? If you're staying late at work because your supervisor's still around, FOPO is laughing at a joke that you don't find funny. It's pretending that you know a song or a movie everyone's talking about, but you
Mm.
don't because it's staying at a job you hate because others deem it to be prestigious. It's avoiding the reunion because you haven't achieved as much as you would have hoped for, or you don't like the way that your clothes are fitting on you, right?
Mm.
It's pretending to drink something at a party because you don't want to be the odd one out. Those are all like subtle
Mm.
behavioral um, conforming and contorting in some respects responses to this underlying psychology, which is I must tune deeply to avoid being rejected in
Mm.
this relentless effort to be accepted. And there's
Yeah.
biology that sits underneath of it, there's chemistry that sits underneath of it, and of course we're talking about the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah. It's well, I was gonna say it's sad, but it is what it is that we're talking about the topic of mastery. And before you can get into this mastery of self, you're first hitting the barrier, which is actually is the people's opinions that are going to prevent you even getting on the road anyway. Because for me, my background's UK policing, and whilst I was employed, I became passionate about the topic of leadership, and I started to use my social platform to share my passion for the topic of leadership. And it brought me some unwanted opinions, sounding like, what does Ryan Hartley know about leadership? I was dealing with people that senior rank thought that leadership was to do with how long they'd done the job and what they had on their shoulders. And young Ryan Hartley didn't really he had enough self-awareness, but he still had some wounds to heal. Took it very personally. And so this fear of other people's opinions, I can now look back with compassion at my younger self, because I fortunately had enough idea of my values, which were both to have belonging and authenticity. And I got to a fork in the road where I couldn't have both. I had to make a decision whether I wanted to be authentic and true to who I was, or cut some of myself off and to belong. But then I come to the conclusion that it wouldn't just be belonging, it would have just been fitting in. So I made the choice 2020 to leave full time. So I really resonate with this idea of, fear of other people's opinions. And I know that many of my listeners will absolutely, because we're on the brave path of courage. And I guess what does that then, having that desire to be our most authentic selves, to become our fullest expression, what sort of things does that then bring into our awareness, our psyche, our mindset, our challenges?
I think I do think there's service in kind of pulling back the curtain to the biology of this for just a minute,
Mm-hmm.
because belonging is safety. And I'll even use your language here, which is fitting in
Mm-hmm.
is safety. And
Mm-hmm.
we are biologically wired for that. And so the way that this works is like our ancestors gave us this gift.
Mm-hmm.
And, our brain has figured out how to pass on the best learnings to the next generation. One of those learnings is that most of our brains are optimized for survival. Not everybody's, but most
Mm-hmm.
of us, that's kind of the prime dictum. And, we are highly skilled at scanning the world for the smallest of threats. And then, like, without having to think about it, we've got all these systems in place to mobilize us to fight, to flee, to freeze, sometimes submit, which is a different problem to talk about. But go back to our ancestors. They figured out how to navigate the saber-tooth tigers and the wildebeest, and the dark ages were incredibly difficult, and our ancestors figured that out as well. And there's a whole host of responses that we've inherited, and they're all pretty well understood. But there's this very specific mechanism to help us reduce the chances of getting ostracized from the pack. So it wasn't the wildebeest and the saber-tooths that are the most dangerous thing for us only. It was if we got kicked out of the tribe, that it was too hard to survive, because that type of rejection, it was nearly a death sentence during that time, meaning that if you're kicked out of the tribe, it's too difficult to hunt, gather, forage, build a fire, build a shelter, protect your children, and potentially fight hostile humans and animals. So we had to tune to make sure that we are connected. Now we've got that ancient mechanism in our brain, so an ancient brain with modern challenges, and we haven't squared those two. And so we no longer need to fight wildebeest, right? That's not what we're doing. But public performance, acceptance by others, that is, quote unquote, walking on stage is evidence to be one of the most terrifying fears for people, public speaking. And public speaking doesn't mean, having to go on stage. Public speaking is when you're speaking in front of another person. So it shows up in small rooms and meeting rooms and living rooms. It shows up in holiday parties, private conversations. And that's what this whole thing is about, is this exhaustive attempt prior to any opinion actually being shared, this exhaustive approach to be favorable, to not be rejected. It starts in the closet when you're picking the shirt you want to wear. And is that choice for you, or is that choice for how others might look at you later? It's so insidious, but it's so taxing, because it just kind of primes that fear response, which is a very expensive mechanism in our body. It's very expensive to be a human that is chronically thinking about acceptance and rejection just below the surface. It's very expensive. And so that's why I think we've got this energy crisis, is that what we're actually doing is tuning to the fear, the greatest fear we have. I think it's the number one constrictor of potential, of human potential, is the fear of other people's opinions. And so, those are all the foundations of it. And how does it show up on authenticity? They're completely orthogonal. They don't square with each other at all. And when we've got this hypervigilant social readiness, not only are we obsessing about what they might think, but then when we're actually in front of somebody, we're scanning, we're trying to figure out like micro expressions, eyebrow, like little squints that take place, inflections in voice. Am I okay? Am I okay? Do they think I'm okay? Does she think I'm okay? Are we okay? There's a brain center that's attached to that obsessiveness, which is, called the default mode network. We talk about that in the book as well. But the problem with FOPO is that it is a hidden filter for decision making. It's hidden. And until you square with this, you might not have it. If somebody does not have any FOPO, we probably characterize them as a sociopath or a narcissist. So it is important to care about the opinions of others. It is also equally important to not spend so much time worrying about it. And on the caring part, it's knowing whose opinion you care about. And so if you could just get 4 or 5 people's opinions that really deeply matter. And for me, I got to square those opinions with 2 things. They've lived in the arena. They know what it feels like to be in that space where mistakes are public and costly. And the second is they've made a commitment to know me. And so they know the deeper parts of me. And if you've got those 2 things in place, I feel like I want to know what you think. And I there's no worry about it. Like, I really want to know what you think. And so anyways, there's a lot there that we could pull apart in any way that you want.
I love that.
I'll pause.
I love that distinction you've just made at the end. And I think the thing that's coming to me is the flip side of what you're talking about, is when we live externally based and we get all the love, the adoration, the affirmation, much like Moby talked about with you. That was my experience. So when I then, with Always Better Than Yesterday, went underground, I started to build this little community away from the prying eyes of senior leadership. I got a lot of affirmation. My love language is words of affirmation, and I got a lot more than my wife was giving me. And guess where I went? When there were challenges and issues within my marriage, where did I go? Into this office where Ryan Hartley was loved. So I understand the cost and fortunately my wife and I, we're still together and having learned and grown through this. But yeah, there could have been some real kind of flesh and costs to this if I had not learned to lean into the how much I was living externally to fill something. And I guess this kind of ties on to the conversation that you and I have both had with John Gordon. His new book, The One Truth, is all about if we're living externally, filling ourselves with it external, that leads to addiction. And I think this is why I love your definition of mastery in the book. It's just simply this: an inner directed life externally expressed. Not externally expressed so that I get something. It's just an inner life, an inner directed life externally expressed. I love that definition.
Yeah, there's no finish line in that process. And the expression can come in artistic forms, either on canvas or, on a baseball mound, or it can come in lots of ways, but it can also come in words and relationships. And so the path of insight and wisdom is the path of mastery, and it's insight and wisdom that's applied for some other expression, meaning the expression of helping other people, or the expression of making a lot of money. That could be the path of mastery. I haven't met anyone that squares with mastery and having these kind of fleeting external goals, but it certainly could square. But the idea of it's inner directed, meaning the first rule of mastery, it's the title of the book, is working from the inside out. It is investing in your inner life to better understand how that you can impact those around you. And so the interconnected ideas holds up about this pebble in a pond approach. Yeah. And so when you drop your pebble in the pond, and you've got some weight to your pebble because you've invested in that pebble, you've invested in your weight as a human, you don't get pushed around, that you're able to make a large ripple in the pond that you're in. And so that pebble in the pond idea, I think, is so important, and that's what the external expression is really about. And so anyways, yeah, I appreciate those insights that you have there as well.
You shared in the book some wisdom from one of my mentors from 2000 years ago, talking about building your house upon the rocks. A wise man will build his house upon the rocks, and you contrast the differences between when you build your house on the sand and build your house on the rocks. How is that relevant to the process of mastery?
Well, first principles is what this conversation is really about. In house of sand, house of one with foundation, is when you think about how you conduct your life. If you are making your decisions based on the worrying of other people or what they might think, or your relative to performance to other people, like how well you stack against other people, those are all external, and those are very flimsy. The idea that you can work from first principles, and a first principle essentially it's taking a value and making it unique in the way that you understand that value. So that's what a first principle is. It's not just saying the word love, which is a deep value for many people, but it is putting your unique spin on it. So what is the principle? What's the expression of that principle to you? You could just say love, that's cool. You could say excellence, that's cool. But like the first principles are, how do you articulate your unique expression of those values. That's what a first principle is.
Mm.
So if you have clarity of a handful of first principles, that those are the foundations for how you make thoughts. I'm sorry, how you make decisions, how you choose thoughts, how it impacts behavior. So first principles are designed to influence your thoughts, your words, and your actions. And if you don't have clarity of those, we end up getting whipped around. And most of the 11 world religions did a really nice job on clarifying first principles. And they did I don't know, a less than stellar job in helping people practice the psychological skills to support the animation of those first principles. And, let's just think of Christianity for a minute. Like, it wasn't until, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago that the whole thing was translated into English in the United States. Like, come on, like, help us out a little bit, lower the control down just a little bit, give me a language I understand, give me a direct path. And I'm not Christianity as a whole has turned the corner on what I'm talking about right now, but listen, there's real problems in the quote unquote church right now. All that being said, is there are first principles that are very clear in all 11 world religions, and there are best practices. They're just not clear and crisp as I needed them to be, or I would like them to be. Some are better than others. So there are best practices that are available there. And if you know your first principles, you're building the house on a solid foundation. And so that's the idea. But just because you have clarity of the first principle doesn't mean you own it. You have to practice it, and you have to demonstrate it in high heat moments, in high stress moments. So just saying you're about kindness, that's cool. If that's guiding up thoughts, words, and actions in easy environments to do it, that's cool. When it's convenient, that's cool. But what about when it's hard? What about when someone touches the tripwire for you? What about when someone publicly calls you out? What about when, you've got to do something that's really difficult and it's going to be hard on another person? Are you taking the right time? Are you taking care? So in many respects, mastery is getting yourself out of the mix. Mastery is the hand that leaves the pond without a trace. It is not, like I talked about before, pointing to something. It is rather honoring the thing in and of itself of becoming. And I don't want to be too esoteric in any of this, but the hand that leaves the pond without a trace, I think, does make a lot of sense to me.
I'm enjoying this conversation. I don't want to ask you too much about your book, because I'm conscious that we still want people to go get it and read it. But
I appreciate, like, let's roll up our sleeves on it. Like, I do want people to buy it. Like, it would mean a lot to me. Yeah.
The official launch is the 7th of November here in the UK. It's available 7th of November. One of the things you talk about is that there are 3 phases of FOPO. Maybe you could outline those 3 for us.
Absolutely. And, I didn't realize this. This is my first book, and I'm excited to share these ideas with people. But what I didn't realize is pre-game kind of is the whole thing, or pre-launch is the whole thing. So the hope is that people will buy the book earlier.
Absolutely. Pre-order.
That's the idea. Like, that sends a signal. And apparently that's how you get on all of the indicators that, like, there's something to this book. And so, so that would mean a lot to me as well. Okay, so the 3 phases of FOPO. There's an anticipatory phase, and that's like the bulk of the expression of FOPO, is like this chronic worrying about what other people think. And then there is this middle phase where we're responding in a way where we're figuring out how we're going to deal with this potential opinion that's being expressed. Okay, so the first is anticipation. The second is when you're in that environment with somebody and you're relentlessly checking. So it's anticipation, checking, and when you check, you're looking outside of yourself. You're scanning for external cues for potential rejection or acceptance. And we're really good at this. So like some people are better than others, but most of us are really good at that. Then the third phase is how you respond. And there's some very predictable ways that we respond. After taking in those cues, we confront, like, hey, like, is there something up with us? Okay. We conform. So we'll laugh at a joke that we don't think's funny. We'll contort, meaning we'll laugh at a joke that we feel offensive. We'll critique somebody else. We'll say, it's a way of trying to get ahead of them critiquing us. It's a way to deflect from somebody, having a negative evaluation of us. We'll talk, nonsense about somebody else. And then we'll also disconnect. We'll if we feel as though like it's just too much, like we'll leave before they leave us. So again, I'll just kind of, in cleverness, we'll contort, we'll conform, we'll confront as a way to kind of relieve the anxiousness of not knowing. We'll start to critique other people, and we'll disconnect from the relationship if it feels too overwhelming. So those are kind of the big phases, if you will.
I think the anticipation is always the worst bit, isn't it? Because it's the bit we're doing to ourselves. Because the way I visualize it is there's these game shows, isn't it, where there's some animal or something in a box, and people have got to put their hands in, but they're not allowed to see what it is. And it's just like a kitty, or it's like a bunny rabbit. It's something nice and fluffy, but you could just see their anticipation of what it is often the thing that causes them the most pain.
That's it. Well, that's the essence of anxiety. So it's not a clinical anxiety condition, but it is holding hands with anxiousness. And so that's the anticipatory process, is like, am I okay? Are they going to think I'm okay? Like, how am I going to show up later? What are they going to think? All of that. And it shows up, I think, in more ways than readying yourself for a holiday event. It's like, it's every morning for so many of us. And so that's the one to pay attention to.
I know that you're a father and you have a son. I have a 10-year-old son, and being afforded great conversations with great people like you, I'm always trying to impart some of that knowledge and wisdom with my son. Obviously he's 10 years old, and I've got to be proportionate with that, but I want to kind of help him grow. And how do you balance this this incredible amount of knowledge, wisdom, experience? How do you adapt that as a parent, notwithstanding that our children, they're on their own journey, they're their own people, not having them live the burden of their parents, shall we say? I think Jung was quoted as saying something like that. I guess, let me just simplify the question: is how do you impart your wisdom and your knowledge and your learning and your teachings with your son?
Cool question. I think the most powerful thing to do is to be about it.
Right.
So how you show up is far outweighs the words that you say.
Yeah.
And so there's an old saying in sport, is that people will not care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
And so the way that you authentically present yourself. And so we want our kids to think about us as good role models. And sometimes, like, I'll say this through a story. This point that I want to make is that I did an ultra event, and it was a 32-mile ocean stand-up paddle. There's only 20 some people that have crossed this channel in Southern California on a stand-up paddleboard, and I went for it. It was hard, and I fully hallucinated while I was out there. It was disastrous from a physical exhaustion standpoint, and like, it nearly, I almost broke. If I don't want to be over dramatic, but it was like super heavy out there, and I knocked off so much like calcium and built up protection mechanisms that and I just there's how hard-headed am I that I need to get to that place to kind of relieve some of the the trauma and the insights that I needed. But that's a different story. So I'm done with the thing. I'm in my shower, and no, I'm sorry. Let me tell the story in sequence. I'm on the beach. My wife and my son are there as I, step off the surfboard, and there's a bunch of friends and whatever, and I fall apart in my wife, and so they run out to greet me,
Mhm.
and they're kind of running in the water, if you can imagine that, and they we hug each other, and there's this embrace by the two of them, and I just fall apart, and I'm letting go. I'm crying as like a deep cry, not just like there was no tears of relief here. This was like this was a cry like I'm so grateful to see you, and I'm different. And it was a really deep cry. And so it lasted. My son at that time was like maybe 10
Mhm.
10 years old, same age as yours. And it lasted long enough that I could feel my son like not know what to do with that intensity of emotion.
Mhm.
So I looked at his eyes, I looked at my wife's eyes. Okay, so we kind of wrap up the intensity. We go to the beach, high fives, hugs. I need not be carted off, but I need to get off the beach to get some fuel and hydration. And so my son was outside of my door as I was showering, and I towel off, and I turn the corner, and he's outside the door, and he looks at me. He says, "Dad, are you okay?" And I knew what he was talking about because he had never seen his strong father like that. And I looked at him and I said, "I'm really good."
Mm.
And he said, "I've never seen you like that." I said, "Yeah, I've never shown that side of you." I said, "I'm sorry." And he says, "For what?" I said, "I'm sorry, I've been hiding that part of myself for you." And he said, "It's okay, Dad." He said, "I actually liked it because I cry too. And you're always help me when I cry
Mm.
and when I'm sad or when I'm scared. And
Wow.
so I'm glad I was there for you, Dad." And so I share that whole story with you for this reason, is that we want to present like we have it all together. That is FOPO.
Mhm.
Presenting to our children like we've got our shit together, like we are the strong ones. And, like one of the great things you can do to your kids is show up and talk about the mistakes you made today. Ask them about the mistakes they made. Smile when they talk about it. Be curious about how they're trying to figure it out. Be curious about how you can be in it with them. Do not flip and give them the answers.
Yeah.
Do not talk about the highlights of your life alone, the highlights of your day alone. You know, show up in a way that doesn't scare them because you're a mess every flipping day. And like they're like, "Oh, I have to be the adult here." Don't do
Mm.
that. But show up in a way that they can feel you. So they know that when they feel those things, it's normal. And so it's as simple as this. Son, I had a tough time today. I made a mistake that when I made the mistake, my whole body lit up. Like I felt like I wanted to escape. I stayed in it. I've got to figure out like how to get better at this part. And it scared me. And
Mm.
I'm so glad that I can talk to you about it because um, I think I have a way through this now. And I'm really excited to try next time. You see what I just did there? Right? That's the way that the kid looks up and says, "Oh, the adult is figuring it out. And oh, the adult has a path. So I don't need to be anxious and worry and be the adult here. I
Mm.
can still be a kid." And so that kind of relating with your kid is how you undo the FOPO that they're learning is part of survival.
Yeah.
So when they look at social media highlights
Yeah.
and they, aren't sure about the zit on their face or if their shoes are cool enough or they watch somebody get, you know, in a fun way, get teased, bullied. There's nothing fun about bullying, but like in a fun way that they're watching, you know, it's not like it hasn't got to that level, but it's kind of locker room or schoolyard type of stuff. That shit can be so dangerous. And they're learning how to respond to it. They're learning like, ooh, well, I can't wear those shoes again, or those shoes that Johnny wore that got, you know, made fun of. Like, I got to sharpen up. All of that stuff is like the on-ramps to FOPO. I want to make sure I'm very clear. Making fun of other people in a schoolyard, that ain't cool. Okay. But it happens. And what I'm saying is that when that happens, just the observers of it are shaping their response on how they can be okay in social settings. So there are so many on-ramps to FOPO that, and that is what the book is about, is like, you know, here's many on-ramps and here's some ways to, you know, practice and develop psychological school skills to get on the on off ramp of it. And I'll land us with this one here, is that performance-based identity, this idea that I am who I am based on what I do and what I do in relationship to you. So performance-based identity starts to form at an early age. And when our mentors and our teachers and our peers and our parents and our uncles and aunts and cousins, when they talk to us about how good we're doing at something, and especially if you were good at something at a young age, like that is a rapid on-ramp to FOPO. Because you're starting to build your identity based on how well you do relative to others. The off-ramp is to put that to sleep by letting go of I am who I am based on how well I do relative to others. That's the performance-based identity. And reinvigorate a purpose-based identity. Reinvigorate, like with great clarity, what am I doing here? What am I doing in this boardroom, in this living room? What am I doing as a human? And those are big questions now. Okay. So one way that you can start to activate this purpose-based identity is to think about, in a very thin slice, what is my purpose today? What is my purpose this week? As you get better at answering those two, what is my purpose for the 6 months? As you get better at those three, you'll start to be able to go, what is my life purpose? And, you know, you can do it by time, what I just did, like today, this week, this month, 6 months, this year. But that's not totally enough. It's good. You can do it by role. What is my purpose as a dad, as an entrepreneur, as a friend? That's good. It's practice, but it's not the full thing. The full thing is, what is my purpose here? And it's so overwhelming that I'm suggesting, like, you know, thin slice it a little bit. And when you get clear about your life purpose, it's so much easier. You know, it's so much easier, but it's not easy to get to that place. And one of the ways we can do it, and I'll round third base here, you know, is one of the ways we can do it is do that internal alone work. You know, there's an alone work here, and then also have conversations with people of wisdom. Like, share it with the people that you trust, that are committing to understanding you. And sometimes you pay those people. Sometimes they're psychologists. Sometimes they're the wise woman in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's, you know, of course you're not paying some people, like, but I would not be bashful in any way to say, I'm looking for somebody with wisdom and deep science. Like, go get in those rooms. They're some of the best conversations you'll ever have. You know, square up with that idea that psychologist for the week. That's old. That's the way of the dodo. Drop that as soon as you possibly can if you want to live the good life. I think that's a really important thing to square up with.
You were involved in back-to-back Super Bowls with the Seattle Seahawks, and you talked about how performance-based identity. I'd love for you to share some insights in the kind of off-season conversations then after winning the Super Bowl? Like, how does that then conversation, mindset, identity, purpose, how did that change after becoming Super Bowl champions?
There's a moment. So I had left traditional sport, and I started in traditional sport after I, got my training was done, and I left after a couple of years because I was very clear that these human-made rules and the amount of narcissism and the excuse that we don't have enough time to invest in the psychology of the athletes and the coaches was so frustrating. I was like, this is not honest. You ask a coach and an athlete, like, how important is the mental part of the game? I'm going back 20 years. And they'll say, oh, yeah, at this level, it's like 90%. It's like 70%. Oh, it's at least 50%. Everybody on that level is good, right? Physically and technically. So the separator is the mental. And then the follow-on list, like, oh, okay, good. So how are you guys approaching that type of training? And they go, well, we've got a psychologist, that's about, a couple miles away. And like, we send folks, are you kidding me? Like it was, they didn't understand best practices of how to put it inside the rhythm of training, as opposed to this other thing that was weird down the hall or outside the building. So I left out of frustration and disappointment, and I went into environments of consequence where there was a pull, because if they make a mistake, they the worst of the worst that you can imagine could or would take place. And so there was a rich pull to say, I need command of my mind. Come on, Doc, let's go. And so those honest environments had so much appreciation because the risk was so high. It was a great working laboratory for a little over a decade. To the Super Bowl. So I came back full circle to traditional stick and ball sport. I met the head coach, Pete Carroll, over dinner. A mutual friend put us together, and it was a great conversation. He wanted to fundamentally do it different, better than it's ever been done before. He had a rich understanding of psychology and really wanted to do something special. Our second year of working together, we go to the Super Bowl. We won. We just had the 10-year reunion this weekend. So I'm buzzing because we just had the whole kind of crew back together up in Seattle, and it was awesome. I'm no longer with the team. During the pandemic, I decided not to stay in the bubble or go in the bubble. And so we win, and champagne's flowing. We're in the locker room. Music is, blaring. It's that iconic experience that you've seen over and over on, ESPN or whatever ticker that you're watching for sport. And like, that energy is big and is wonderful. And Coach Carroll calls everybody in. So this is 63 athletes, 25 coaches, another 25, 30 support staff. Like, so there's nearly 100 alpha competitive humans, and he pulls everybody in. Testosterone is high, joy and happiness is high. We got our arms up together or on each other's shoulders. And he says, we now have what everybody wants. And I thought to myself, oh shit, what is happening here? No way. Has this all been fake? Is he going to say we now have a championship? We now have a trophy? We now have like this thing, this external. And I was like, the pit of my stomach was so big. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. He pauses in dramatic fashion as well. And he says, the knowing of what it takes to be our best together. And I thought, oh, that's right. That's why we partnered together. The knowing of what it takes to be our best together. So that type of union and interdependentness and this interconnectedness, those are first principles. This high regard for each other, this reliance on each other, this fundamental commitment to be our very best individually and together, to hold the standard of excellence and relationships. It was all there, and we now have the knowing of what that takes. So that next year was quite amazing, for two reasons. Every off season, people have children, they have unique experiences, they have deaths, they get paid, they get less money than they thought. There's when people come back to work, they're different. So we have to recapture everything. And that is actually true on a micro level. When I see my teammates at Finding Mastery, overnight, they've changed. So have I. So we have to recapture that relationship in a way. So I'm sharing all of this to say that people were different. And it was amazing because they were fundamentally different. They now had the knowing of what it takes, but some of them drank the Kool-Aid just a bit too much. So some of them were frustrated that they didn't get enough of a gameplay. Like it was fundamentally different. And the second year we got back to the Super Bowl, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
And we lost on the half-yard line with seconds to go on the clock. And it was the most dramatic loss because the entire stadium, 80,000 people, our entire sideline, the quarterback and the team on the other side for sure thought that we had it won, and we're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. And a sequence of events took place. The ball was turned over. The only thing that would take place where we don't win, and there was this gut-wrenching loss for so many people. And so I don't think the off season for most people there was easy. And so it was really hard. And I don't think it took us 3 years to recapture the competitive essence that we had going into those two Super Bowls. It took 3 years. At best, maybe 2.5, but call it 3 years to recapture. If we work from this concept called long body, and long body is this idea that we're all connected. And if one of us is suffering, then the whole body is suffering. And so we had enough people that were suffering, that the whole long body was suffering as well.
I think the same's happening to Lewis Hamilton, being so close to getting that title on the final day, the final lap of the final race of the championship, to get his 8th world title. And yeah, it's suffering, is it? So it's fine margins at elite level. I feel blessed to have had this conversation. I know that our audience will have taken so many things. So I just want to share some deep gratitude for you and your work. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this book when it's live, but also encouraging people to pre-order.
Please.
And a bit of a personal story. I like to go, as I prepare for interviews, I like to go to the acknowledgement section. I think it gives me a deeper understanding of who I'm speaking to. I couldn't believe what I saw. You acknowledge your nana. You acknowledge your nana being your biggest champion. And a week before this interview was scheduled, my nan passed away. I call her my nana, so she is a nana. And I had a belief that she was in some way part of making this interview happen. Might be a silly little thought, but I thought, because I've had some significant interviews all booked in within a few days of her passing. And I thought, okay, she's had a little play in this. And then I see your acknowledgement. You even refer to her as Nana, and that she's, my Nana was my biggest champion. And so I just wanted to share that little moment. It's just like, okay, I'm in the right place, doing the right thing. And
cool, man.
I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, that feeling when you just bring someone up. So right now, I feel all of that, And still, thank you for sharing that part with me. Who knows how this stuff works? And relationships are at the center of this whole flipping thing.
My final question is, I have a word here, always better than yesterday. It's called Heartprint. And the word Heartprint is to describe the legacy that we leave behind, the ripple effect, the possibilities that we create. And Michael, love for you just to take a moment just to really consider, I know you talk about the regret of the dying in the end of your book. Maybe let's do the opposite. Let's get to that point where you are reflecting back on your life, your work, and I'd just love to know what you think your Heartprint will be.
Oh, the hope is for me, the hand that leaves the palm without a trace, and acknowledgement is not part of that koan. What I hope is that the people that I'm fortunate enough to be part of their life, whether it's in person or it is in a remote way, or it's through writings or any other form, is that somehow they recognize that they have so much more to go and so much more to grow, and they're embracing that process to be able to give more of themselves, to becoming more, to give more of themselves to the relationships, one with themselves, to give to the relationship of others, to give to the relationship with experiences, to give into the relationship of Mother Nature, to give to the relationship with the next generation. And so that's the ripple effect, the relationship with yourself, others, Mother Nature, experience, machines at some level. And my hope, I'll just be really clear, is that they are lit up in a way that they know that they have more to go, more to grow, and more to give. And they understand some ways to do that. And so that's my commitment to figuring out how to translate. It's actually first metabolize best practices of science, best practices of how people work on the frontier that have never been in the laboratory, and to metabolize those two to share them in a way that makes it available for people like me and hopefully people like our communities. So that's my hope.
I love that. Much love and appreciation for you, your work. Absolutely check out the book, First Rule of Mastery. Go pre-order it now. Michael, be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
Everything that you need is already inside you. And when you make the commitment to work from the inside out, you begin to understand how to unlock the potential that is lying dormant. And when you can do that with work within yourself, you have the ability then to create a ripple effect to help others do the same. And so everything you need is already inside you.
I appreciate it, brother. Hey, my friends, thank you for making it to the end. I hope that our time spent together today has left you a little bit better than before you push play. I'd really appreciate if you just took a moment to leave a review to allow me to meet more people where they are and hopefully leave them a little bit better too. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organisation, then head to alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com to connect. And while you're there, let me know one or two things that you're going to do as a result of listening to this conversation. I absolutely love hearing your thoughts, your reflections, and the things that this spark in your own heart and mind. If you want more insights from my heart and mind, I do send out short episodes on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And again, I hope that they serve you well. I appreciate you listening. I'm Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, a podcast for heart-centered leaders just like you. Keep leading, my friends. Always love.